Right now, in some of the most advanced coffee farms around, producers are covering their freshly harvested crops in a thick and fuzzy white mold. They're not ruining the harvest. Instead, they are using an old biological trick to completely alter their coffee beans. The engine behind it. Let's look at the fungus itself to understand what exactly is happening. Koji is the common culinary name for Aspergillus oryzae. It's very complex biologically. For centuries, this exact mold has been the engine behind some of the most famous food staples in Japan. It's a vital priming agent that's used to ferment soybeans into soy sauce and miso, and it's the exact catalyst required to brew sake. The superpower of the Koji fungus are found in its enzymes. As the mold grows, it aggressively releases powerful amylases and proteases. You can think of these enzymes as microscopic scissors. Their sole purpose is to cut through complex, tasteless starches and rigid proteins, breaking them down to highly flavorful, simple sugars and amino acids. Specifically, the fungus creates glutamate, which is the compound exactly responsible for the savory and heavy sensation we know as umami. For hundreds of years, this fungus was strictly a culinary tool. But recently, a few alternative coffee producers realized they could use these microscopic scissors to hack the beans, as it were. Hacking the coffee biologically. The Koji coffee process is very new. It was heavily developed around 2020 and 2021 by a team of coffee consultants, by a barista champion named Capo Pavalainen, and also experimental producers in Colombia. The application process is fascinating. It actually starts far away from the farm. The producers cultivate the Koji fungus on a bed of steamed rice for about 48 hours. Once the white fungus blooms across the grains, the rice is dried out and ground down into a fine powder rich in spores. When the farmers harvest their raw, red coffee cherries, they take this powder and sprinkle it directly onto the fruit. They mix it evenly into the vats, making sure that every single cherry is coated in spores, and then they leave it to ferment in a temperature-controlled environment. Pre-digesting the bean. This is where the microbiology takes over. Raw coffee cherries are dense with complex starches tucked away deep inside their fruit pulp. Under normal circumstances, those rigid fruit starches don't translate into sweet flavors when the coffee is eventually roasted. The Koji fungus goes around this limitation. As the mold blooms on the outside of the cherry, its enzymes penetrate deep into the fruit flesh surrounding the seed. The fungus literally pre-digests the coffee fruit. It takes all of those locked up, unusable pulp starches and chops them up into accessible, fermentable sugars, while converting rigid proteins into savory amino acids. The coffee seed then acts like a sponge and absorbs this newly created and highly concentrated syrup. The fungus is changing the raw chemistry surrounding the bean in a fundamental sense. When these Koji fermented beans are finally shipped to a roaster and hit with high heat, all of those freshly absorbed simple sugars caramelize beautifully. The flavor profile. Understandably, the first question on everyone's mind is whether the coffee tastes like mushrooms or mold. The answer is absolutely no. Because the fungus caused a huge spike in simple sugars and glutamate, the cup of coffee is very sweet. It possesses a surprisingly heavy, silky mouthfeel and subtle umami characteristics that are almost impossible to find in traditional coffee. It drinks more like a rich, textured broth than a thin morning brew. How it disrupts the economy. From a consumer standpoint, this is a massive industry disruption. Historically, a coffee's flavor has always been dictated by terroir. The soil, the altitude of the mountain, and the local climate determined how good the beans could taste, and therefore, how much a farmer could charge for it. Koji processing is essentially a cheat code. Producers can now take a perfectly average, mid-tier coffee bean grown at a lower altitude, coat it in Koji spores, and artificially elevate its sweetness and complexity. When that new bean hits the tasting table, it scores just as high as a luxury brew. This levels the economic playing field. Farmers who don't have access to premium volcanic soil can now use advanced fermentation to create a result that's just as premium. The future of precision fermentation. We are moving entirely past the era where coffee was just washed in water or dried in the sun. The global industry is entering a phase of precise microbiology. Producers are starting to treat the raw coffee cherry as a blank canvas for engineered fungal fermentation, more than a simple product. So by manipulating the exact strains of yeast and mold, they can literally design entirely new flavor profiles in a lab before the coffee ever leaves the farm. The line between traditional agriculture and biotechnology has now been erased.